Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Bugonia, the new comedy, thriller, black comedy, absurdist, surreal, it's all sorts of things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. And it's based on a 2003 South Korean sci-fi film called Save the Green Planet. I don't know anything about that film.
Me neither.
Maybe if you've seen that film, you will know how Bugonia goes. I don't know. Maybe they chat. I don't know. But it's adapted from that. Spoilers, of course, will be coming up in this. The premise is that Emma Stone is the CEO of a large pharmaceutical company. Evil in all those ways that CEOs are. And Jesse Plemons is a beekeeper and a conspiracy theorist. He's a true believer. You know, yes. Every conspiracy theory, he loves it. And Aidan Delbis plays Don, his cousin, who at the very least is not that bright. Possibly,
I think it's clear that he's mentally disabled.
I think that might be the case, yeah. And you know, he's kind of very much in Teddy's wake. And we open on Teddy espousing these theories that he has that, you know, this one particular person, the Emma Stone character, is an alien. And when you start off talking about colony collapse disorder, which is the thing that happens with bees, and the reason that this is happening is not evolution, it's not your general kind of environmental worries, it's very specifically a plot by Andromedan aliens who run the world here, and she's one of them. So they're going to capture her and find this out. And so here come, you know, some spoilers. I've been saying for weeks, I thought the twist in this was already obvious, which is that she will turn out to be an alien. You know, like they spend the whole thing going, of course she's not an alien, and they're just mental and stuff. And what we ultimately find out is that everything he was saying was true.
I know, I didn't like that.
Yeah? Okay, go on.
Well, I thought until then, the film to me was so funny and so sad, right? Because kind of what comes across is this America that is really enslaved, you know, with these callous, self-obsessed rich people who rationalize everything that they do onto others. And then the impossibility of communicating through a kind of a closed system of conspiracy speak, right? So I thought kind of all those initial conversations after they kidnap her were so kind of, I don't know, instructive, because, you know, you just can't communicate unless, you can say, yes, I am an alien, right? And hope for the best, but actually you can't convince them that they're not right about something. Like, the belief is so strong and it's such a closed system, and so on. And I thought that kind of added, I don't know, a tragic dimension to the film, that it was both recognizable and real, and kind of tragic, really. And then, of course, as soon as she does turn out to be like an alien empress, wearing those chunky knits that look so terrible, you know, I thought it undermined the film.
I mean, it sort of does, right? Like, it kind of very effectively expresses the kind of the mind of someone who is really lost in conspiratorial thinking, who thinks that there are easy answers to things. You know, like the problem with colony collapse disorder is not that you need to figure out how to take better care of your bees, that kind of thing. It's that there is a plot behind it. You know, I mean, this is kind of the thing with conspiratorial thinking in every sense, is when you're confronted with something that is confusing or problematic, the easiest thing to do is to assume there is purpose behind it somehow. And that's kind of where, and you know, some of these are very kind of, a lot of conspiracy theories are not that threatening, you know, like it's not that threatening to believe that man actually hasn't visited the moon and that it was all done in a studio. Like, it's wrong, but it's not really hurting you that much. But the gateway drug of thinking that way gets you into a place where you will actually start making bad decisions. And, you know, and we see this guy who is all the way down the rabbit hole, except what happens is it turns out he's right, despite the fact he died before he could learn that. I mean, God knows what was it, because, you know, she puts him in this closet, which she says is the teleporter to the spaceship. Which, you know, you're thinking, because it's still not established at this point, is she an alien or not? And you're thinking, okay, she's luring him into the closet so that she can go and get help. And then we find out it is a closet when she uses it. But you're thinking, if he'd made it up to the spaceship and not accidentally blown himself up just before then, what would they have done on the spaceship? Like, surely the point of this was to get rid of him. Anyway, I agree with you. It's sort of, I mean, it's what the film is leading to, that revelation that she's an alien and that this was all true, and yet, as you say, it does kind of completely undermine everything about it, because the film is not telling you this is the way to be thinking. Like when he, kind of explains why he thinks what he thinks, he's talking about, for instance, when they've got her unconscious when they first kidnap her, and they're looking at the body, and the Don is saying, how can you tell? And he goes, it's the density of the hair, it's the narrowness of the feet, and you can tell all this stuff, and it sounds like bollocks, right? And it is. Well, we don't know where he's got this from. We don't know if he's just lucky that he's actually managed to catch an alien, sort of thing. So the idea that he was right and was carefully thinking about this and so on it's I don't know, it's very hard to judge.
Yes,
right?
It's very hard to judge. Also, it kind of undermines so much of what was good about the film, because basically, if she's like the superior evolved person who will be punishing Earthlings for not being more involved and for killing the planet, then why is she such a bitch?
Well, it sounds like quite bitchy. Or you should be punishing humans for being the failed experiment that we are.
Well, the claim or the rationale for destroying life on Earth is that humans haven't evolved into being better people. Yet she herself, as the owner of, this corporation that what promises well-being tomorrow, today, or something is what
if there was a slogan, I didn't catch it.
Then why is she such a bitch? Why is she so horrible to her employees? Why does she not give them time off? Why does she not give them better working conditions? Why has she caused, this guy's mother to ill health? And there's a line from the mother, played by Alicia Silverstone, that says, first they poison you or whatever,
They sell you the illness, then they sell you the cure. It's money both
exactly,
ways. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, she is meant to be the evilest form of that which she then judges to be insufficiently evolved at the end. It kind of, to me, dramatically, it doesn't cohere.
And she does talk about, in that one speech where she's kind of freed herself, and she's come across all of the other nasty shit that Jesse Plemons has been up to, all of the body parts and things. When he comes back, that's when she has that kind of big monologue, which seems to reveal that although of course she could still be improvising it, we don't know anything up to so far, but she has that big monologue talking about the history of her people, the Andromedans, and the reason that we look similar is that you are us originally. We were Andromedans, we seeded life on Earth, you were failed, blah, 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 this happened. And one of the things that she says is that the corrupted humanity that developed from what they had seeded, she found herself becoming more like us. I've become more cruel. I'm like you now. It's not good, So there is that line gives that some degree of context. But I know what you mean.
Also, thinking back now, it's an interesting film. I enjoyed it very much, and I thought it was full of wonderful ideas and a very interesting critique, and a kind of very interesting look as well. Everything looked so poor and grotty, and the streets were unpaved, and everything was a bit run down and contrasted to the gleaming sterility of corporate headquarters. But I thought it was interesting that all the people that you see are flawed, on the verge of immorality, right? So the part of the reason why the mother is suffering the way that she is because she was addicted to opiates, right? The Jesse Plemons character is really a serial killer, under the guise of conspiracy theories. The cop who comes to intervene is clearly a child molester, right? So kind of the only person who is
morally in the clear.
Morally in the clear is the one who's intellectually
Don
challenged. So,
and his life is ultimately completely tragic. I mean, right at the start, his cousin Teddy said, enforces chemical castration upon him. We have to do this. We have to clear our minds psychically of anything that the alien can use to take advantage of us. And one of those things is lust. You must chemically castrate yourself. She'll use sex against you. And he's like, I was really hoping one day that I would have sex with someone. And he doesn't get to do that, and he spends the whole time just under the thumb, not even allowed to speak, not even allowed to go to the toilet. during dinner, and winds up convinced into a position where he kind of sort of happily shoots himself. It's an extremely tragic story. I mean, the whole film, I think, has a giant, I wouldn't even say it's a streak, it is misanthropic through and through.
It is, isn't it? I mean, it is, and yet it's funny. And I like that about it. Though, and I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the mise en scène, right? Because, I now can't remember to compare to all the other Yorgos Lanthimos films, and I think I've seen all of them except for his first ones, the Greek ones. But in this film, at least, he's got a very static kind of mise en scène, doesn't it? It's kind of, the camera moves very little, except, when Jesse Plemons rides towards the hospital at the end.
I would say it's an interesting thing, actually. I think the camera moves when people move. It's just a thing that most of the film is set within the house. People are just sat there having conversations. But, like when we see her walking to work at the start, for instance, the camera's very active there. The camera's moving, motivated by people's movement, I think. That's what I would say. I also think it shares that wide angle thing that I think is probably, again, it's funny, the other day we were talking about Frankenstein, and I was saying, I think this is true of Guillermo del Toro, but I can't put it to mind necessarily, that he uses wide angle cinematography a lot. I'm pretty sure this is true of Yorgos Lanthimos.
Oh, for sure.
And you see it here. It also will very rarely put the camera at eye level. Like remember the bit at the end of The Fabelmans where he meets John Ford, and he says, when the camera's up here, it's interesting. When the camera's down here, it's interesting. When the camera's when the horizon's at eye level, it's boring. Yorgos Lanthimos seems to really believe in that. The camera's always up high or down low, doing finding some dramatic, interesting angle that the wide angle emphasizes.
I thought the film lacked visual poetry. The only moment that kind of stood out is that moment where she's shaved and you see her look, and actually, at that moment she looks surprisingly beautiful, and then the lights go down and you see half her face in the darkness, and then she turns to an angle, and you see her in profile, kind of illuminated as if by candlelight. I thought, that was kind of a moment of visual pleasure in a film that doesn't seem to have much.
I think more of it visually than you do. I think it is generally lit very beautifully when you see the silhouette is illuminated from behind, that sort of thing. And also I think the colours really pop at points as well. I mean, when Don kills himself and she wants it with blood all over, that is really visceral. In the truest sense.
Yes. Well, you may be right. I kind of have reservations about that, though. I think the film works very well. It's a very, very difficult film to film, right? And I think it's very successful, and it made me laugh for sure. And Jesse Plemons, I think, is fantastic. It's kind of interesting, really, because until that ending, which I think is kind of false, undermines the film and feels kind of tacked on. Yeah, so you found it, what's the word? Inevitable, right? I found it tacked on and very inevitable. But until that moment, I thought it was his film. Yeah, he was the one acting, he was the one thinking, he was the one planning. Yeah, the Emma Stone character was his prisoner, really. And then, of course, again, the film reverses that, because, by adding on that tacked on ending, then the film really does become about her, right? Kind of, she starts the film, she ends the film, she destroys the world. Yeah. It
sort of depends on how seriously you take the question of whether she's an alien or not. Because if you don't take it that seriously, as I think most people probably don't, then the film is Jesse Plemons, because the film is about his way of thinking and what's he going to do. Yeah. If you take that question very seriously, then the film is hers, because it's about, is she or not? Will her secret be outed? How is she going to get out of the situation? See what I mean?
I see what you mean, but I think really the film doesn't give you, or it didn't give me any clues as to the possibility that she would be an alien. I mean, really. I'll
tell you the one thing that because I was going the whole film, I was going, I'm pretty sure she's going to turn up an alien. And the reason that I thought it was, an inevitability is putting it a little strongly, but I definitely sort of definitely felt it was coming and had done since I saw the trailers. And the reason was that it's Yorgos Lanthimos, and I thought he's going to have some kooky Yorgos Lanthimos twist in this, and it will turn out that the thing that's dumb is actually true, and that's the joke was on us all along, sort of thing. The one thing in the film that I think is good evidence or good reason to actually question whether she's an alien or not before the reveal is that she knows a lunar eclipse is coming. There's no reason for her to know that. We're told in intertitles 3 days to the lunar eclipse, 2 days to the lunar eclipse, with no other context given. Like, no one else has mentioned the lunar eclipse.
Well, I thought she discovered that when she went into the room and read all that he had found out about her.
Oh, did she? Yeah. Was that shown to us?
Yeah.
Well, in that case, hush my mouth.
Yeah, she goes into that room, finds all the bodies and corpses of all the other people he thought were aliens that weren't, right? And then finds all this information about her and also about the lunar eclipse, I thought.
Oh, right. If we were shown that, then I missed it. Then in that case, hush my mouth. Well, that's one thing where I thought, right, here's something that she wouldn't have any reason to know, but maybe she does.
Well, that's my memory of it.
It's scant evidence anyway. Like, that aside, there is nothing for you to grab onto and say, oh, there might be some real questions about this woman. There's nothing.
Yes, and also, I thought it was very much his film, not only, because of this question whether you believe that she is an alien or not, but also because, you're in his house, you're in his head, the relationships that you see in the film are all his mother, his cousin, his molester, babysitter, you don't know anything about her, right? Which I suppose you can make a counter argument and say it's because you know nothing about her that she's an alien queen.
in a sense, this discussion reminds me of Ex Machina, and spoilers will be coming up from Ex Machina when I explain this. But it's because that film, the whole way along, so if you don't know, that film is about a guy who is invited to, again, like a big CEO's house, to evaluate this AI-driven robot that he has. And the guy is a guy, and the robot is a sexy woman, and it's all the focus is on the guy. You think it's the guy's film, and then the way the film ends turns it round, and it becomes the woman's film. The woman or the female robot all of a sudden has all of the initiative, and makes the final decision that people, I think, find really kind of objectionable quite a lot of the time. So the end of that film is her leaving him to die, locked in a room in that house and going out into the world on her own. But that recontextualizes the entire thing, because if you then go back and look at the whole film from her perspective, the whole film from then up until that point, you're going, it's his film. How does he feel about this? Is he going to fall in love with this robot? Does he think she's alive? All that kind of stuff. You go back and look at it again from her perspective, and it's completely about someone who is a prisoner, abused very probably, and sees an opportunity to manipulate someone and make her escape. You can watch the whole film second way. Once you realise, once that ending turns it round, I'm not sure that this will have that. Because I was already thinking of the film that way from the start. I did see it the way you do, as his film primarily, but I did have a certain degree of focus on her. I was thinking. I was keeping that question alive in my head of, is she an alien, and therefore what is her game plan, sort of thing. So that idea of watching the film a second time with the other character's perspective more at the forefront of your mind is not going to work for me here. But I wonder whether it will really work for anyone to the extent that I think it works really well with Ex Machina. I'm not sure that's really going to happen here, because I think there's, as you say, there's too little context about who she is or might be and the way she's thinking and so on. Like, the way she's behaving is essentially the way that anyone captured in any film is, which is try to lie to your captor, try to seduce them, try to work your way out, all that kind of stuff. It's not like nothing is that clever or original or different about the way that this person is behaving. Just, and the fact that she's an alien has no bearing on that.
I'm trying to think about, this question of this paranoid conspiracy ideas, because on the one hand, I think that the film really dramatizes the danger or the kind of the discursive loop and the inability to communicate that an adherence to a belief in a particular kind of conspiracy can bring forth, right? So in that sense, I think kind of to say that the conspiracy is true is kind of politically kind of dangerous in a way, yeah. I.e., we must always entertain conspiracy theories because, they always contain a nugget and they may be true, and how do you get away from kind of being closed on in ideological loops unless you kind of, can begin to think in terms of conspiracies. And of course, kind of, on the other hand, you do think, well, things that people think are kind of completely absurd, are sometimes true. Yeah. So I'm not sure kind of where I'm going with this, but my initial impression is that I was very disappointed that the film effectively begins by critiquing kind of conspiracy theories, makes you laugh at them, and then upholds them.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure I agree that it actually critiques them all that much as well, because I think it finds the way that Teddy thinks quite entertaining. Even if it's not giving its hand away that he turns out to be right at the start. I mean, with the things that he's getting Don to do, in particular, the chemical castration. That's a real thing to do to someone, and it impacts his life.
Well, and he's killed lots of people. We know,
and then it turns out he's killed lots of people. Yeah. But I mean, right from the start, what we're given right at the start is this thing about chemical castration. You're going to have to do this, this, and this, and we see how under the thumb Don is. And you could play that very dramatically. I mean, that is it's a great deal of responsibility to hold over someone, how you're affecting someone's life. But it sees it as fodder for comedy. It's a funny thing.
I like the downplaying of that.
Yeah.
And I like the downplaying of the child molestation.
I mean, I'm not necessarily critical of that. I'm just saying I'm not sure that the film is being as critical of conspiratorial thinking and being in the rabbit hole as you suggest.
Well, I think whilst the film was unfolding, that's definitely the way that I thought. And that's why I laughed at the things that I did. Yeah. Right? So if you take it up to the point where she does become, the alien empress, then actually I think what the film is a kind of a critique of conspiracy theories, really, and conspiracy theorists. I mean, had she been, a human at the end, I think the film would remain as a kind of a critique of that, really. But of course, it changes it. I think it does. It is a critique up to that point. That is why you're laughing at the things that he says. Oh, yes, the fact that she survives all this pain is proof. Kind of those things wouldn't work in the way that they do if you thought she was an alien empress, right? So I think that is the critique up to that point. But then, of course, that, is that critique still there because you felt it? Or is it completely undermined because, the film makes it real, right? So I think those are interesting questions. I think about the film, and I do find the film kind of, very interesting, and enjoyable to watch. But
the ending of the film, in which she and the council, or rather she announces to the council that humanity is a failed experiment on Earth. And she pops the dome over the flat Earth. It's a flat Earth, incidentally. So that conspiracy theory is in there, and it's constantly there. We continue to see imagery of it, but it's all just kind of kept on the down. As you say, it's underplayed. We just by the way, it's a flat Earth. She pops the dome on the flat Earth, and everyone on Earth is killed instantly. And this is where you could see the film at the height of its misanthropy, because it sort of has that idea of, we are ultimately the problem on Earth, and the solution is that we all die and Earth will continue.
And I thought it was interesting that montage of images that you get at the end, there isn't a single moment of beauty. Yes, it's kind of, packages going through the assembly line, or kind of people working in the factory, or a not very attractive couple in the midst of making love in this kind of...
It's very judgmental of you. I thought they were beautiful.
Yeah, right.
You see lots of attractive people dead on the beach.
I thought they weren't particularly attractive, and it wasn't a particularly attractive image.
Yes.
My thing is that he wanted to make these pedestrian images, so actually you're not mourning for the loss of humanity.
I sort of think that. I mean, I didn't find it moving, for sure. But I think the film is kind of I'm not sure the film is aiming at that. But I was...
Well, what is the montage for then?
Well, I was just looking up the word Bugonia before because it doesn't appear in the film. It's not like she turned out to be Empress Bugonia. So, so like, where has this title come from? And it's I think there was it's a Greek word, kind of ancient Greek, which means ox birth, I think. And basically the idea is this was kind of like written in sort of textbooks as bloodlessly sacrificing an ox so that your bees would thrive, right? That's very vaguely what I was reading. What we see at the end of this film is a bloodless sacrifice of everybody on Earth, and the final image is the imagery we started off with of the bees.
The bee. I thought that flower that we see was a begonia.
Oh, I think it's a different word. Begonia, the way it's spelled, at least, is this word.
It's with a B-U, isn't it?
B-U, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in English, a begonia is a herbaceous plant.
Yeah. The
flowers of which are brightly coloured sepals, but no petals.
That's B-E, right?
Yeah.
B-E.
And that, I think that the description to me matches the thing.
It may well be. But I think what I'm saying is that you can... I think one thing they've done is they've picked a word which sounds kind of interesting to name your film. Like, a film title doesn't necessarily have to make sense. I mean, Inglourious Bastards, like, it was spelled wrong and it didn't really relate to anything. They were kind of called the Bastards, but it sets a tone. It's interesting, and you can attach the kind of whole film to it. I think that's an element of what's going on here with just calling it Bugonia. But I think this idea of this kind of bloodless sacrifice that allows something to thrive beyond it, you can kind of attach that to the end of the film and see it as not necessarily as misanthropic as I'm suggesting, and that although you have to read an explanation of what that word means in order to understand this, you can see it as the death that allows something else to thrive in some way. Maybe that's a kind of implication. Or I mean, it really that imagery at the end really reminded me of COVID. Although I think that might be because I've also recently been watching old episodes of How I Got News For You from the COVID era when everything was shut down. They were doing it on Zoom, and it was like reminded me very vividly of how weird that time was. And I remember going to work because I was an essential worker, and theoretically, and the roads were empty, and everyone remembers how the shops were empty, and we were queuing up and so on. Very, very weird times, and this imagery at the end really reminded me of that. But one of the things that was happening at that time was wild animals were flooding back into cities. Dolphins were swimming up the Thames or whatever. Sheep were kind of walking through London. And like people were like, "Oh, the world's coming back to life." All we had to do was shut ourselves away for like a week, and the Earth just found its way again. And that reminded me of this, right? Like that's the kind of lasting imagery I think you're left with is the end of humanity, but an Earth that will replenish itself in our wake.
I want to say a few words about Jesse Plemons because I think he's so fantastic in this, and he's got such a kind of peculiar look, with his blonde hair and his reddish blonde beard and, this kind of ordinary looking guy, verging on ugly, but, that could also seem attractive at points, and, his skinny little legs, and you do see him as kind of like an everyman, figure in the film, basically kind, and you see him kind of talking, to his co-worker at the factory and so on, and then discovered to really have been a serial killer, so I thought he was tremendous, in this kind of low-key way, because for me, he was at all times believable, as both the person who's kind and he's a good son and, kind of a bit nerdy and so on. And then also as somebody who has been capable of doing those things to other people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that your description of him is something you could basically apply identically to the character Todd that he played in Breaking Bad, which was the character that I would say made his name.
Right.
Brought him to people's attention. I don't know if you watched, I think you did, right?
I did, yeah, but I don't...
So Todd was in the last season.
I must have missed his season.
Todd was in the last season. He was the one who turned out to be like a proper psychopath. But he was a very unknowable character. You really didn't know what was going on with this guy, and he was extremely polite and very professional. He wanted to learn the business and stuff, and he was also capable of killing someone at a moment's notice with no thought whatsoever because it suited his purposes. He kills a kid at one point, and that kind of has kind of very dramatic repercussions and so on. But like he just did it because it was the right thing to do. It protected them. That kid would have told people about what they were doing and so on. And he was like people found him a really scary character because he was capable of that, but also when he wasn't doing that, he couldn't have been nicer. He was polite and genteel and clever and curious, so to some extent, not all of that is identical to what's going on here, but there are definite similarities, and that two-sided character is absolutely there, except it's just that the one side really, or the extent of the one side, is not shown to us until much later on in the film as a reveal. Whereas in Breaking Bad it was much more of like a character component, from the start. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I it's one of those interesting films because I thought it was an experience at the cinema, and yet it's one of those things that I'm not sure I would have sat through on television.
Interesting, yeah.
So, if you are thinking of going to see it, do take the opportunity of seeing it at the cinema.
Yeah, I would say so. There were points early on when I thought this is taking a little while. Those early conversations, I thought, it took a while to develop a sense of movement and purpose and destination. Really, I think it's around the time the cop arrives. And that's when I start thinking, you start to get cross-cutting all of a sudden because there's action upstairs, there's action downstairs, and the cross-cutting is not quick. We see a long scene upstairs, a long scene downstairs, but it gets a little bit quicker, and a sense of tempo and a question of will they be found out starts to develop. And that's when I think the film starts to pick up pace and get quite interesting. Also worth mentioning that the film is shot on VistaVision almost entirely, and you can tell from the aspect ratio because it was that non-standard aspect ratio of 150 to 1. So we've seen The Brutalist was the film that has kind of really kick-started this revival of VistaVision in the modern age, and then obviously we saw One Battle After Another, which you got yourself down to London to actually see projected in VistaVision.
Yes,
and now we've got this, which I didn't know until I saw the aspiration. I thought I'm going to have to Google this.
Right.
Yes, VistaVision. So it's coming back in a big way.
Yes. Also worth saying that Marlene Dietrich lives. The closing song of the film is Marlene Dietrich singing "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" Yeah, and it's kind of actually quite powerful, really. You have like the deepness of her voice and her inflections, and and it kind of is a lovely way to end the film.
One last thing I think we should point out is we've talked about Jesse Plemons. We haven't talked that much about Emma Stone, and Emma Stone's remarkable in it, and she's dedicated a serious amount of herself to this because she had her head shaved. There was footage ages ago of her at some the Met Gala or something like that, and she was like adjusting this wig, and you could see like she was mouthing to people like, "Can you tell it's a wig?" And everyone, that's not the point of wearing a wig, right? You're supposed to fucking hide it. The idea was she was hiding the fact that she had actually shaved her head for this film. That happens very early on, and she's remarkable in this. Like she's definitely. I think this is her fourth collaboration with Yorgos Lanthimos. Those two see eye to eye. And she is she seems to be his muse to some extent.
Yes.
Although I think that's putting it a little bit one-sidedly because she produces and she's deeply kind of creatively involved. They clearly have, I don't know, it feels like there's something really intuitive about the way they work together because she gets it.
Yes.
Like what they're doing together, she understands the way that he wants her to look, the way that she wants her to behave, the way that she will appear on his screen, in his camera.
Yes, it's interesting because I was going to make the argument that, or the point, and I'm not sure how true it is, but I think she's like a real star. In the sense she's magnetic. You can't help looking at her. And of course she's very good as well. Yeah. And kind of contrast that to Jesse Plemons, who to me, seems to become that character really. Yeah. Equally, you watch him and, with interest and so on. But there's a sense of him kind of, I don't know, shrinking into the part whereas, I don't know, there's something about her cheekbones, her eyes, it was just, it kind of exudes a kind of a star quality. But anyway, kind of a superficial thought probably.
Maybe, but she is, she's in a position where she is making very interesting decisions about the work that she does. and this
Yes.
this is another one of them.
And these are all chances, and they're all kind of serious films. Serious films about ideas, worth doing and worth watching.
Yeah. So I do recommend this. I like the way it looks. I ultimately like the way it flows. I think, we're not sure about that ending, but at least it ends in a weird way. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I do like a film that kind of threatens to do a weird thing and then actually does it.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't really feel
The knits made me laugh. When all the aliens appear with his chunky knitwear.
Yeah. I mean, the way that the end of the film looks once you make it to the spaceship is pure kind of 1960s Star Trek throwback. It's like the redness and the cheapness of that set.
Yes.
It's having a lot of fun with the way it looks at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.